Haunted house levels are really prevalent throughout gaming, and not even just in horror titles. If a game isn't going for complete realism, it'll likely have some kind of spooky environment at some point, and there's a good chance it'll be a scary house. Now, we're not necessarily covering the scariest haunted houses in gaming. Also, not every house on this list is haunted in the traditional sense of just being filled with ghosts. They do, however, all have that aesthetic and contain some kind of monster out to get you. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are the 10 best haunted houses in video games. Number 10. The Baker's Main House, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Resident Evil 7 mostly takes place in a few different houses, each of which have their own horrors to get through. The old house contains numerous insects and the horrifying abomination that Marguerite Baker has become. The barn has become a place for Lucas Baker to relive his weird saw fantasies, and then there's the main house, and this is where you'll meet Jack Baker. At first glance, the main house really shouldn't be that scary. It's a regular old house where you're pursued by a rural American with an axe. The thing is though, Jack is much more persistent than the other enemies in the game. You never know when you're going to turn a corner and see him. The other areas have more of a focus on the smaller enemies and simply build up to a boss. Yeah, you're pursued by Marguerite in the old house, but not for long. The main house is the equivalent of being stuck in a house with a madman who wants you dead. Oh, and he's immortal, so good luck with that. Number 9. Comstock House, BioShock Infinite. While BioShock and BioShock 2 can very loosely be called horror games, BioShock Infinite definitely can't. You spend most of your time running around in broad daylight using your superpowers alongside your vast selection of guns to mow through enemies without a care in the world. Then you enter Comstock House, a place filled with people wearing masks of former US presidents and men wearing metal helmets. As long as you're quiet, everything should be fine. That is, until you pull a lever just to turn around and have a boy of silence standing right in front of you, before alerting every enemy in the nearby vicinity that you're there. This honestly might be the scariest jump scare in anything. The lack of Elizabeth by your side in this level is another reason it's so scary. This is one of the only times in the game where you're truly alone. And as you're getting chased down in the Comstock house, you truly start to miss Elizabeth's company. Number 8. Queen VANESSA'S Manor, A Hat in Time. A Hat in Time is a fun, colourful game where you get into wacky scenarios like visiting a film set run by birds, joining a parade on the moon, and visiting a town run by a fun version of the Mafia. It also contains a world where you sell your soul to a demon. Now, Subcon Forest, the world where this happens, mostly just contains your Halloween variety spookiness. The only genuinely scary part here is Queen VANESSA'S Manor. This isn't some big booze haunt, this is genuinely pretty terrifying. In the mansion, you'll be hiding from the monster that is Queen Vanessa as she roams the halls of this huge building. The level adds the ability to hide as she walks 2 feet away from you, causing you to shake underneath a table, hoping not to get brutally murdered in a game where you felt nothing but pure joy until this point. Number 7. ROIVAS Mansion, Eternal Darkness, SANITY'S, REQUIEM. Whilst Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem is known almost exclusively for its fourth wall breaks, this game is much more than just that. It's a pretty scary horror title even without the fourth wall breaking sanity system, and with the amount of variety in the game, you never know how you're going to be scared next. This variety comes from the fact that the game has multiple playable characters, most of which are from the past. To learn about and subsequently play as these characters, you'll need to explore the ROIVAS mansion as main protagonist Alexandra ROIVAS. This mansion will be where you'll be spending most of your time in the game, as a few characters from the past visit the mansion, and Alexandra, who's the character you'll be controlling the most, spends the majority of her story there. It's interesting exploring and learning about the ROIVAS mansion, even if it appears that somebody is sitting on our remote and turning down our volume as we venture through it. Don't know how that happened. Number 6. House BENEVIENTO, Resident Evil Village. Throughout the Resident Evil series, we've been chased by many a foe. Who could forget getting chased by the likes of Nemesis, Jack Baker, and Lady Dimitrescu? The thing is though, none of them even come close to the terror that is the baby in House BENEVIENTO. Whilst technically not real and actually a hallucination created by the building's actual antagonist, Donna Beneviento, who's creepy in her own right, it doesn't stop making getting chased by a mutated giant fetus any less horrifying. The house itself isn't too bad at first. It's a regular old house with some creepy dolls in it. That's nothing by Resident Evil standards. It's when the lights go off and you're forced to run away from a screaming baby who wants nothing more than to swallow you whole that it becomes one of the scariest locations in any video game. That's not to say the rest of Resident Evil Village isn't scary, just that none of it lives up to House Beneviento. I can deal with the internet's favorite vampire lady any day, just don't make me run from that damn baby again. Number 5. The Clock Tower. Clock Tower. The original Clock Tower, not to be confused with Clock Tower 2, which was titled Clock Tower in the West, is easily one of the most iconic games to never be released outside of Japan. Its iconic nature comes from the fact that it actually manages to be a pretty effective horror game on the SNES. In the game, you explore the titular Clock Tower mansion as Jennifer Simpson, who unfortunately isn't exactly capable of really fighting against the main antagonist, somebody called Scissorman. Because of this, she must run around the mansion hiding from her pursuer whilst trying to escape, and maybe even save one of her friends that she came to the building with. This gameplay inspired many of the modern horror games where you can't really fight back and your only real option is to run and hide. Clock Tower is hugely influential, and it definitely wouldn't be so influential if it weren't for its spooky setting. You'll get to know this house like the back of your hand by the end of your first playthrough, as it's not exactly a big building. This contributes to the horror as Scissorman is always going to be nearby. Number 4. Never-ending Hallway. PT. Whilst you don't get to explore the majority of the house in PT due to it being a demo, you do get to thoroughly explore a single hallway, and since that hallway manages to be scarier than 99% of other entire haunted buildings, the house from PT deserves a place on this list. As you're walking through the hallway, as the name suggests, it never ends. Well, it never ends until you've solved a bunch of obtuse puzzles anyway. As you continue to loop around, things start to change. You start to get stalked by an entity known as Lisa, a crying fetus appears in a sink. Why do we keep talking about fetuses? And eyeballs that always stare at you start to appear throughout. It's terrifying. It's such a shame Silent Hills was cancelled, because that game likely would have given us a better look at the rest of this building, and if a single hallway could create so much horror, imagine what the whole house could have done. Number 3. SHALEBRIDGE CRADLE. Thief Deadly Shadows. There are a number of places that just work perfectly as horror locations. Some perfect examples are hospitals, prisons, mansions, asylums, and orphanages. The last two were combined for some reason into the terrifying SHALEBRIDGE Cradle, easily one of the scariest levels in any video game, which is most impressive seeing that the game it came from, Thief Deadly Shadows, isn't even a horror title. Just navigating the place and learning of its past horrors is scary enough. It turns out nothing good has ever happened in this place. Kids weren't having a great time when it was an orphanage, patients weren't having a great time when it was an asylum, and you're not having a great time now. The reason you're not having a great time is because the building seems to have a little bit of a ghost problem. You'll go from a quiet room where you'll swear you saw something out of the corner of your eye at the beginning, to rooms further into the building where unnaturally tall specters roam the halls, and you're just praying they don't spot you. Number 2. Spencer Mansion, Resident Evil. The Spencer Mansion is the first of many iconic houses filled with evil residents in Resident Evil. Whilst a couple more entries appeared on this list, the Spencer Mansion is easily the most iconic Resident Evil spooky house. Every room feels like it would have had a purpose before it got overrun by monsters, yet that doesn't mean the mansion is just a regular building with nothing interesting to show you. The Spencer Mansion manages to walk that fine line of being realistic enough to be believable, yet be interesting enough to allow for fun puzzles to stop the building from getting boring. You might be in a bedroom one minute, but then in a secret lab the next. If you want to get into the Resident Evil series, then starting off in the first entry exploring Spencer Mansion is a great option. Well, don't get the real original game, go for the remake. Number 1. Luigi's Mansion. Luigi's Mansion. The mansion from Luigi's Mansion stands out among the many haunted houses in the Mario series due to its realism. Whilst the buildings in Luigi's Mansion 2 stray from realism, and the last resort from Luigi's Mansion 3 is straight up magical, every room in the building from the first game truly felt like it would be there in an actual mansion. There are bedrooms for the many inhabitants, a gym, a kitchen, a bathroom. There isn't anything crazy enough to make you stop believing this could be a real place. You know, minus the ghosts. The mansion also works so well due to the way the game is laid out. Instead of rushing through each area as you would in Luigi's Mansion 2, you spend a good amount of time in every section of the building, really getting to know what makes it all tick. Luigi might hate exploring this place, but you probably won't. The games are a lot of fun. That is the end of our list, but make sure you let me know down in that comment box if you can think of any of your favorite haunted houses in video games. As always, I've been Jess from What Culture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.